You know, I wouldn't say that you're wasting your time. In some cases, if you're doing it before you're putting things in the refrigerator, you may end up having a quality issue a few days later because there are some things that should only be rinsed right before you're about to consume them. Strawberries is a great example of that. Raspberries as well. These are things that they retain some sort of essential element that keeps them from rotting. And as soon as you rinse that off, then you've really sped up the shelf life of those products. You know, I wouldn't ever dissuade a consumer from doing anything, but unfortunately I think what's really going to have to happen is that you and your colleagues are going to have to strengthen FDA and USDA so that you know already that those products are safe when you get them home, and you don't need to jump through hoops to put them in your fridge.
What about cereals? When you know, some cereals are just pulled from wherever, the wheat and whatever.
Yeah.
Then there are others that are really processed.
Yeah.
What kind of requirement do we have for making sure before they enter into that process that the elements are safe?
You know, it's interesting. When the pet food that came in from China was contaminated with melamine, one of the things that was most troublesome about that was that the ingredient that was contaminated with melamine is an ingredient called wheat gluten. Goes into a lot of other products. That particular batch was destined for pet food production, but it could just as easily have been destined for processed food like cereal. And so that's one of those things that we really need to be careful about. At this time, those things that are coming in from overseas, the kind of ingredient parts, there are so many. FDA is unable to look at more than about 1% of the shipments that are coming across the border every day. It's estimated that most Americans eat about 13% of their diet from imports. And so when you think about how little the FDA is actually looking at of those products, it starts to become a little troublesome. There are not particular guidelines or safety hoops that those particular ingredient manufacturers have to follow above and beyond anybody else. And so, you know, that's another case of needing to really strengthen the entire system to be sure that those things are safe. For example, peanuts is a similar ingredient. It went into a lot of different products. I think I mentioned over 2,000 were recalled in this last. They can wind up in cereal, in, you know, cookies, crackers, ice cream. I mean, you name it, a peanut can end up in there. And so it's unfortunate that there are not stronger controls on each of those ingredients to make sure that all of those finished products are safe.
Are there any rules of visits for producers or any kind of guidelines given to producers of food items?
For how often they're going to be seen by somebody from FDA, or from how often they're allowed to kind of have people wandering through their plant?
Well, how often they check to make sure that there's a minimum standard.
Yeah. There are no rules or guidelines. It's often done by the industry. You know, if you have a particularly large industry that's well known, that makes a lot of products, they might be asking their ingredient manufacturers to follow stricter guidelines than the government requires. They might be saying, if you want to sell to us, these are the standards you're going to follow. There are actually some retailers who do that. Costco, for example. Costco has a great food safety program, a very robust system, and they require a little bit more of some of the companies that are producing products directly for the Costco brand, and that's fantastic. Incidentally, Costco is also the leader in one of the things that we'd like to see all retailers across the country doing, and that is that Costco is notifying you if you purchased a product that is later recalled. So if, for example, you went to Costco and you purchased peanut crackers, and 2 months later those crackers are part of a recall, you will get either an email, a letter, or a phone call from Costco saying, "Congresswoman, we see that you purchased these crackers 2 months ago. They're now part of a recall. Please discard them or return them for a refund." We think that this is a great idea and that all retailers should be doing this. Many retailers are already collecting consumer information when you make a purchase. If you have a loyalty card or a club card at your local grocery store, So we'd like to see them, instead of just sending us coupons or marketing to us, we'd like to see them prioritizing our safety as well, and giving us a call when there is a product that may be on our shelves. It's particularly important for the kind of products we've been talking about: peanut products, cereals, things that live on your shelf for a really long time. You know, a tomato may last in your fridge for only a week or two, but you could have that box of cereal for months. And we heard of one person during the peanut recall who received a phone call from Costco warning him about a granola bar that he had, that he'd purchased. He called us and told us that that granola bar was in his earthquake preparedness kit, and that he may not have unearthed it for a year or two, or, you know. And so the idea that he could have had a contaminated product waiting for him is kind of alarming. And it's nice to know that there are companies that are starting to let you know, so that you can be reminded, oh, I do have that product on the back of my shelf. I should, you know, go and pull that out and return it.
Well, that is a tremendous program. I've shopped at Costco. So
Yeah.
Now, there are a number of institutions, hospitals, nursing homes, schools, that buy food in bulk.
Yes.
Is there any way they can check prior to maybe signing that contract to see what the record might be of that company, or even sometimes older people are more susceptible to illnesses from foods
Absolutely.
than others. So is there any way to check to be sure that what a nursing home is purchasing or a hospital is really safe, as opposed to maybe someplace else?
It's very difficult. You know, it's interesting. I happen to know of a major national newspaper that is working on a story about that very thing right now, and they are finding it very difficult. They're looking particularly at school cafeterias, and whether there's any way for the school district to really look at the options and see what a food safety record is before they make a commitment to purchase from that producer or manufacturer. And it's very hard. Those records are not things that are routinely available. One of the things that we'd like to see at CSPI is more public access to things like that. We'd like to see, for example, that school cafeterias, which are inspected by the health department, that those results are posted in the window of the cafeteria, so that parents can see, oh, our cafeteria is doing very well on food safety. And if they're not, those parents can pressure the school district to say somebody needs to get in there and train our staff. Similarly, restaurants. Restaurants are inspected by the health department, but we often don't know how well they've done. We'd like to see a letter grade in the window of every restaurant, so that you could know before you go in how that restaurant did on its most recent safety inspection.
Well, let me thank you. We're out of time, but I really enjoyed this interview.
Thanks.
And I will see you next week.
This has been another edition of Report from Washington, featuring Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson. You can reach Congresswoman Johnson at 202-225-8885 or 214-922-8885. You can also contact her through her website at http://www.house.gov/ebjohnson.